So I make this wish to have something more for us than this.
Hello guys, I'm back again. I'm going to be talking about another nation from Dominion 6. This time I'm going to be looking at Pelagia, early age Pelagia. This is a nation I'm actually playing in an online game at the moment. I've recently joined an online game. It should be just starting soon, and I'll include a little bit of footage from that game at the end of this video. But yeah, I've just started a game with this nation, so I thought I would make a kind of guide to it. But let's talk a little bit about this nation. So Pelagia, early age Pelagia is a nation of kind of sea people, mermen and mermaids. Well, mostly mermen. I don't see any mermaids. But this is a nation of underwater mermen and tritons, who are a kind of like a purer version of the mermen. This nation has a lot of good things going for it, but also a lot of big weaknesses. The biggest weakness it has is getting on land. And you can see this is a test game I was playing. This is, I think, the start of year 2. The end of year 1, start of year 2. I've taken over all the ocean in this map, but I've only just gotten onto land. Most of the troops that Pelagia has available are not like they can't go on land. They're aquatic only, so it makes it very difficult to actually take advantage of that. So you can see here, I'm recruiting a bunch of their one land troop. This is one of the few actual amphibious troops that Pelagia has available. Most of their troops are aquatic only. For example, they have this aquatic tag. So that is a big pain for them. It makes getting into the land very difficult, and it makes the later game a lot harder, especially if you're done fighting in the water or whatever reason, like you're finished any underwater battles you have, any other players, or if there's no one in the water with you, then it becomes very difficult to stay competitive in the game. Now, Pelagia is pretty strong in the water. I would say I don't know if they're the strongest early age nation in terms of underwater. I would say not, but they're quite good underwater. They're definitely not weak underwater. However, again, they're very, very weak on land, and they really have not much going for them on land at all. And it's very difficult to get their best mages to come on land as well. But let's move on. We'll talk a little bit about the nation and go into these details a little bit more later. So let's talk a little bit about early age Pelagia. So as I said, Pelagia is made up of two races, I guess. They're both mermen, but a little bit different from each other. You have the tritons, who are the pure aquatic mermen. They're a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, a little bit better than the just basic mermen, but they're aquatic only. They're not amphibious. The mermen on the right here are amphibious, but they are a little bit weaker in general. I guess they're about equivalent to a human. Tritons are a little bit better than a human. But your merman troops in early age are pretty terrible, to be honest. Your only decent troop is the turtle tribe, soldier, and they're not that great, to be honest. And you're really limited on options. Just to kind of highlight the differences, you can see the main thing is that most of your tritons are a little bit stronger. They have a bit higher strength. They have a little bit more hit points. And they also tend to have a little bit better stats. So you can see here, this is a basic kind of triton versus a basic kind of merman. And you can see the stat difference is a little bit better. A few things different here. For example, the protection, that's just because this guy doesn't have any armor on. But that's not really a big deal. But otherwise, most things are kind of the same. The only differences are really these stats here. And the combat speed is pretty similar as well. But let's move on. And the main other thing is the aquatic difference versus amphibious. So let's take a look at the Triton troop lineup first. First of all, you have your militia line. These two militias available, they're both pretty similar. One has a spear and one has a knife. I would pretty much never recruit the one with the knife. He's just really crappy. I mean, they're both really cheap, but a knife is like a length 0, length 1 weapon, and you have to basically get up to anybody, and you're going to be repelled by every single person you fight. And since so many other troops have spears in early age, and pretty much throughout the whole game, basically everybody's going to be repelling you, and these guys are just going to die really quickly. So I would really never recruit the militia, the knife militia. Maybe I would use the spear one, but pretty much I wouldn't use these guys. These guys are really, really cheap, but pretty much all your troops, all your tritons are really cheap anyways, so I wouldn't really choose these over anyone else. Next you have the soldier. This guy's a little bit better. He's basically a militia. I kind of put these in the militia group. He's almost identical to the militia, but a little bit better in terms of stats, and he has a shield, so he's like a little bit better. Next you have the Shark Tribe and Turtle Tribe. The Shark Tribe is actually quite good. I think a lot of people sleep on the Shark Tribe. The main good thing about him is that he's a berserker. So he has this berserk trait, and he does have the short weapons. He has the knife instead of a spear, but because he's a berserker, he won't run away, and he has 2 knives, so he gets 2 attacks. So he's actually, I think he's actually quite good. I think these guys can actually tear up underwater. Now they tend to die as well, but because they're really cheap, you can mass a ton of them and just throw them at the enemy and really cause a lot of havoc. So I really like using the Shark Tribe, especially against other players, because it can really mess up their formations. And again, having a unit that won't run away is really useful, especially facing some other possible underwater competitors. For example, Relay, which relies a lot on mindless units. Lastly is the Turtle Tribe. Again, this guy's pretty crappy. This is one of the, I don't know how I would call it, a wild Triton, I guess. He's worse stats than Soldier, but he does have better armor, which is, I guess, makes up for that. But again, I don't know. It's kind of like you're trading stats for a little bit of armor, but I'd much rather just upgrade to the Coral Clan in that case. Now, thinking about the Coral units, you have the Coral Clan and the Pearl Guard. Both these guys have a lot of things similar. For example, they both have the Poison Barbs, and they both have Formation Fighter, which is very unique for an underwater unit. I don't really recall many underwater units that actually have access to Formation Fighter. So these guys both have Formation Fighter 2, so they'll be able to be masked up quite well underwater. You'll be able to put 2 of them to a square, I believe. And even though these guys are not too strong, they will be able to put a lot of damage just because you can cram them all in together. They also have decent armor too. They have these Poison Barbs. Now, normally the poison effect is not going to be that effective unless it's a really long battle. That's why I think it's worth, for example, for your Sacrets. The Pearl Guards are your Sacrets. They also have the Bodyguard trait. It's worth putting on some blesses for them if you are going to be fighting underwater, if you know you're going to have an underwater fight. I think it's worth putting on some blesses to give them a little bit more staying power. Some kind of protection-based bless or some kind of resistances. Because, again, you're going to be able to cram a bunch of these guys together. And as long as they can just hold on and keep fighting, they'll be able to put out a lot of damage and last quite a long time. The last Triton unit is the Rider. Underwater, I think this guy's pretty good. It's kind of like equivalent to a light cav or a medium cav, maybe. But again, your horse or whatever the hippocampus doesn't have any armor. Your guy has armor, but the mount doesn't have any armor. So I don't know if I would call it a light cavalry. But the fact that you do have this cavalry option underwater is a big bonus in the early age, because I don't think any other early age nation can compare with the speed of Pelagia, especially Pelagia's cavalry. So the fact that you do have a cavalry option opens up a lot of mobility options for you that other nations just don't have. Now, talking about the merman troops, they're a lot more limited. Underwater, you only have these 2 on the left, the Turtle Tribe and the Net Thrower. I would say the Net Thrower is actually quite good. I like using Net Thrower just because the net will entangle enemies you're facing and make them easier to get hit. So you can pair these guys up with some other units, maybe your cavalry or your Coral Guard or whatever, if you're fighting a battle underwater, to kind of mop up some of the frontline troops and then have your cavalry run around and like stab them to death. The Turtle Tribe is really not good. The really only reason to use this guy is, I mean, he's not too bad. He's basically just equivalent to a generic medium infantry, I guess. The only good thing about this guy is that he can go on land. And he's basically your only real option for going on land. This guy and the Net Thrower are your really only options to get on land, and they're both not that great, because fighting on land against whatever independent forces or even enemy players with basically the equivalent of an indie kind of medium infantry is not really that nice. These 2 on the right are your land recruits. Now, once you do get a land fort up, you can recruit these guys. I don't know if these guys are that great either. The shore fighters, kind of like, again, like a light infantry. He's got a javelin and a spear, but beyond that, there's not much to say about him. The side raspis, or side rapist. This one's a little bit of a sussy kind of name, but the side raspis, he has a longer spear and some heavier armor, and that's about it. He doesn't have formation fight or anything cool like that. So besides the fact that he has a long spear and a bit heavier armor, there's not really much to say about him. And another bad thing is both these guys are poor amphibian. That means while they can go through water, they can't really spend too much time there. They're not going to be that effective fighting in the water, and their armor is going to get rusted because they're wearing iron armor. So that's kind of a downside of them, but I really wouldn't even bother recruiting these guys to fight underwater anyways, because for one, they're not even that great as land troops, and two, your underwater troops are way better than these guys for fighting underwater. So I would say the poor amphibian is more for making these guys useful for example, crossing rivers. At least you can cross over rivers or do a quick jump over the ocean if you need to. So that's one advantage of being amphibian, but definitely you shouldn't be really fighting underwater with these guys. Now let's look at some of the Triton commanders. First we have the two generic commanders, your Triton Priest and Coral Commander. Triton Priest is a recruitable Holy 2, so that's actually quite good. He has 2 recruitment points, so you can only recruit one of these guys a turn, but they do have a fairly decent leadership, I think 50 leadership, and of course because they're sacred you can add some whatever blesses onto them, though I wouldn't really bother doing much of a bless strategy with this guy. The main thing is that he's a recruit anywhere Holy 2, so if you need to fight underwater against like Therodos, for example, you have a lot of holy commanders to manage that. Next to your Coral Commander, this is just your generic Triton Commander. He's quite good, but again, underwater only. Now you have your 2 big mages. Both these again are aquatic only, and both these are really good. For one reason, because they have this Pearl Cultivator trait, and that lets them turn water gems into an equal number of astral pearls, which is excellent. This is one of the highlights of Pelagia as a nation, both early age and middle age, and this enables a lot of your strategies as you go on. First of all, you have the Pearlmage on the right here. This is basically a weaker version of your bigger Pearl King. He has 2 water, 1 astral, and 1 nature, and then a random chance of these 4 at the bottom. So this guy's quite good. Again, he's underwater only, which is not great. The main reason you'd want to recruit a bunch of these guys is for their Pearl Cultivation trait, because you can get a bunch of these guys sitting underwater and basically farming pearls for you. But other than that, these guys are not going to be your battle mages, and they're not that useful on land. So I wouldn't really bother with these guys too much. I mean, you should recruit them. Basically, you should get a few forts underwater, pumping these guys out constantly, because that Pearl Cultivation trait is going to be pretty useful. And they're generally pretty good research as well. They've got 15 research, so they're going to be very useful in that. So definitely it's worth getting these guys. Next to your Pearl King, this is your kind of highlight unit. He's also Pearl Cultivator 5, so he can turn 5 gems, water gems per turn into 5 pearls, which is great. He also free spawns Hippocampus, which are the kind of horse units, that the riders ride, which are also quite nice. He's also a really great mage as well. He's got quite a few paths. He's got 7 paths plus Holy 3, so you do have this access to a recruitable Holy 3, which is really great for some strategies later. For example, if you want to fight a nation again like Therodos, having Holy 3s easily available is really great for that. He's astral, so he can easily be killed into communions along with your pearl mages. And his paths are quite good. This is one of the strongest, I would say it is one of the strongest water mages in the early age. He's natively water 4, and he's always going to be water 4, which is really nice. That allows you to do a lot of things underwater, which is for fighting, for example, summoning elementals or any other big water spells, which will be very useful for underwater battles. So basically this guy is really useful as an underwater commander and fighter, and he's not too hard to get on land. He is pretty useful if you can get him on land. The main thing is getting him an Amulet of the Fish or something similar to that, like a Shambler Skin armor, and then you can use him to be kind of like a thug, or even he could make a pretty decent super combatant, I think, on land. He does have some drawbacks. Mainly, he's only Astral 1 natively, and he's only got a 30-something chance for being Astral 2. So he's really, really vulnerable to getting magic dueled to death, because basically any dinky little Astral mage, Astral 1, Astral 2 mage, is going to nuke this guy pretty easily, and he's super expensive to lose in a magic duel. Next, you have your merman commanders. You have a few generic commanders, your scout, your turtle chief, and your priest. So not much to say about these guys. They're all like pretty much what you expect. You also have your commanders, your mages. The Pelagian mermage is your only amphibious mage. He can go on land, and he has a pretty wide path spread. He has natively water 1, And then he can possibly get these 4 paths, including earth, nature, water, and air, which are all pretty useful, but he's only going to have 1 of each, or possibly 2 water, so very, very shallow in terms of his ability, so that's not too great in terms when it comes to recruiting these guys. Next on land, you have the Pelagian Explorer, and this guy is almost the exact same as a Pelagian Mermage. He has all the same magic, all the same stats. The main difference is he's a really excellent researcher. He's got Research 11, plus Adept Researcher 2, so he's going to be researching like crazy. If you can build a couple forts on land or just recruit a bunch of these guys, you'll be able to get really, really high research extremely fast. The other thing is he also has a chance for Astral, so this is your one option for pretty easy access to communions on land, and that allows you also to kit all these other possible paths into your communions later. You also have the Shore Commander I forgot to mention. This is again just a generic commander for your land troops. Now let's talk about the last unit. This one doesn't really fit into either the Tritons or the Mermen. This is your icthyid pearlmage. Now this guy's pretty crappy in terms of his stats. I mean, he's not that great. He's only got Astral and Water. But because he's a guaranteed Astral 1 mage and he's pretty cheap, he does have a use in terms of your only real underwater option for easy communions that can also go on land. So this is one of the few options that you have that is a communion mage that can also be amphibious. So you can take these little icthyid communions on land. As well, you can kit them with one of your other commanders, for example, a Triton King with an Amulet of the Fish. And that can also be a pretty useful communion if you're limited on your land ability or something like that. The one downside for this guy, I would say, is he's cap only. So recruiting these guys is taken away from recruiting your Triton Kings, which is kind of annoying. But again, this guy does have his use as a underwater only but amphibious communion mage. And that's basically his only purpose. Now let's talk about strategy. First of all, the number 1 strategy for Pelagia is getting out of the water. Now, the basic strategy is just building up a big army. Now, as Pelagia, you really want to take scales. It really depends who you're fighting. I think if you're not really fighting anybody underwater or you're alone, I would just go for scales only. Take high order, high production, high growth, high everything, and just pump out tons of units. Even if your units are crappy, if you just have enough of them, you'll be able to overwhelm whatever indies you come across and be able to carve out a little territory on land and build some forts, and then you'll be a little bit safer. But we can also talk about ways to make it a little bit easier, especially if, for example, you can't take good scales because you're fighting some other enemies underwater. You need to sacrifice some of your scales for a bit more of a bless. There are other ways to supplement your combat ability. One way is algae men. I think algae men are a really excellent summon for you. For one, they're totally amphibious. They're also resistant to a lot of weapons, pierce and blunt weapons. They resist poison, so if you want to do some poison effects later in the game, these guys could be pretty useful. And they're mindless, so they won't run away either. A lot of your mermen are kind of crappy in terms of their morale. They're not too bad, but especially the net guys tend to run away. So these algae men will stay and fight, which is really great. And they do have 2 attacks, which are pretty weak, but you know, they hold the line pretty well. I think these are really good summon. They're only 1 gem, and you get 4 of them per gem, so it's really, really valuable. And since your capital produces nature gems natively, it's really easy for you to get these guys. So a big group of algae men can really supplement your expeditionary force onto land. Next thing to consider is summoning elementals. So summoning the lesser water elementals specifically is really easy for all of your mermages. All of them can easily cast this spell. It's only Conjuration 3, and these elementals will help supplement your army a little bit as well. You can just spam these out pretty easily and get a fairly decent force. A couple of mermages summoning water elementals can also make it a little bit more, make your combat force a little bit stronger. Some of the mermaids as well, since they have access to air and earth, they might be able to cast some of the smaller earth elementals or air elementals if you really want to. Another thing is taking cold scales, because in cold scales on land, the water elementals will turn into ice. That could also be a good reason to take high cold as Pelagia. Most water nations tend to like taking cold scales anyways, but just to recommend for you as well, the ice elementals are pretty decent. They have a lot of the features of earth elementals in that they can trample, but they also have a cold aura, which again can make it a little bit easier for pushing out onto land. Now, let's getting settled on land. The first thing you should do is try to find a decent province, probably pretty close. I wouldn't expand too much on land. You're really not going to be able to fight a lot of land powers. You're really weak on land. So I would try to carve out a small domain, maybe practice some of your diplomacy with your neighbors and try to secure some kind of peaceful coexistence with whoever's nearby you so they don't try to push you out of the land. I wouldn't be too greedy on land for the early game. Just take a small area. If there's any islands, that would be excellent as well. You don't really need to produce much on land. You just need a place where you can cast some land-based spells. But take a few provinces on land and really fortify them as much as possible. And once you do, start pumping out a lot of these guys here. These guys are really excellent. Again, they have really high research. And when you consider that they have +2 for the adept research, and if you can somehow get +3 magic, or +2 magic even as well, but it is possible for you to get +3 magic depending on what god you choose. You can get these guys up to maybe like 16 research, which is really crazy. So if you have forts pumping these guys out, your research is going to go through the roof. And that's not even including other things like maybe quills to boost up your research or any other things to help buff your research a little bit later. Let's also talk about getting some of your big mages on land. I think the only mage that's really worthwhile to get on land is your Triton King. There's only really 3 options to get a commander on land. There's no option to get troops on land. It's these 3 items here: the Robe of the Sea, the Shambles Skin Armor, and the Amulet of the Fish. Shambles Skin Armor comes pretty early at only armor level 3, and this will allow you to go on land, no problem. Later you get Amulet of the Fish, which is also pretty easy for you to create. And this also, again, it gives you air breathing. And then last one is Robe of the Sea, which gives you air breathing plus a bonus to your water magic. All of these are good options. I would say the Amulet of the Fish is a little bit more useful because then you're not using your body armor slot just to get on land. But again, if you really want one of your Triton Kings on land pretty early, Shambles Skin Armor is super cheap and it comes really early in the game. So that's an early game option. Later, I'd probably make Amulet of the Fish. Again, this is really easy for you to make because a lot of your mages are going to have water and air. So you can make this one really easy and then also get on land using that. Now let's talk about some other strategy options. First of all, obviously, is communions. Now, communions are a big part of every nation that has astral access. You get a bunch of slaves and a master and just cast whatever spells you want. You can cast a lot of small spells and just kind of spread out the fatigue, or you can use the path buff you get to cast some bigger spells. So that could be whatever you want. Again, maybe a Triton King could buff himself up to cast some really big spells. Whatever you might be, like Master and Slave, for example, that might be a good option. Or anything, could be anything really. But that's kind of one way you can do communions: a bunch of slaves and then one master casting a big spell. However, I think Pelagia is a good candidate for turbocommunions. Now, what is a turbocommunion? It's kind of like the reverse of a communion. You have 1 or 2 slaves that are really beefy and have high HP, very powerful, while you have tons and tons of masters who are generally lower level and weaker, but they're all kitted to the same slaves. So maybe, for example, 2 Triton Kings. Triton Kings are very high path in general. They have a lot of paths available. They also have a lot of HP, and you can kit them out with a lot of gear. For example, I showed some options like a Coral Blade or a Ring of Regeneration. These 2 together can give them a decent regen and decent amount of extra health to help make Turbo Communion a little bit more viable for them. You can also cast some spells. For example, Personal Regeneration. One of your masters casting this will also affect the slaves. That'll make them also regenerate even more to make them last a lot longer and be able to support more masters. Enlarge as well will give them an HP boost. So again, that'll make them last a lot longer. And you can even take a Regeneration Bless to make these guys even more tanky in terms of being able to do this. I think I really like to do that, take a Regen Bless on the Triton Kings. Because they are sacred, they will take that pretty well, and it makes them into really excellent Turbo Communion slaves. But again, that's a really greedy play and not that useful if you plan to fight a battle underwater. What can you do with these kind of communions? Well, you can do a lot of things with them. Since you have a ton of masters, all of them getting a pretty decent path boost. For example, all of these little Pelagian explorers would get a +1 path boost from 2 slaves. So you have many of these guys with a fairly modest boost, but they can cast some pretty decent spells. So if you get just a couple slaves and quite a few masters, you can, for example, make a bone melter battery, which is really powerful. This is basically a equivalent of Soul Slay. It'll basically kill any unit that it can affect that is not resisted. If they don't manage to resist it, it'll basically die. So this is a great option as well. Falling Frost, another option. Your Triton Kings can do this pretty well as well. But if you make a big turbocommunion, you can have a ton of these little guys casting Falling Frost. And as long as the enemy doesn't have cold resist, this could be really effective as well. Other things could be just spamming elementals. Elementals cost a lot of fatigue, so this could make this a lot easier for you to spam out some big elementals. Or even some other things, like again, you can make a Soul Slay battery, Blade Wind, Thunderstrike. All of these are good options for you because, again, really nothing's out of your reach as long as you have the magic paths available and as long as you have enough slaves to boost all your commanders up. It's really not a big problem to cast many of these at all. Let's also talk about some useful summons. One of the useful summons for you, especially if you're going to be planning to fight underwater, is Queen of Elemental Water. Now, this is only Water 5. That's really easy for you to get up to. Your Triton Kings are already Water 4, so they just need a 1 point booster to be able to cast this no problem. And getting Water Gems is so easy for Pelagia. All of these Water Queens are a big game changer when it comes to fighting underwater. If you're having a big war with another underwater nation, it's kind of at a stalemate. These Water Queens can really make the difference. These are excellent underwater thugs, like the best underwater thugs available. And while most of them are aquatic only, this one, Queen of the Lake, can also go on land. Now, she's not as useful on land because she doesn't regenerate. All of these will regenerate in the water, which makes them so powerful. But she is quite good on land as well, so that is another option for you. Another one is the Bishop Fish. Now, this guy is pretty weak as a commander. Basically, the only benefit for him is that he's Holy 3. So the main reason you want this is if you need a lot more Holy 3s to supplement your army. Again, if you're fighting Therodos, for example, or a nation with a lot of demons like Lanka, these guys could be a good option to get some more holy magic going. And they're pretty cheap as well and easy for you to cast. Another option would be if you're doing a Throne Rush. You can get these guys, ton of these guys pumped out, and basically Throne Rush with these guys along with your Triton Kings. Another useful one for you is the Contact Naiad. This is your main way to break into higher nature. It's 3 water and 1 nature, which is super easy for your mages to cast. And this gets you a 3 water, 3 nature, which definitely allows you to pump up the nature a lot higher. You can get all the way up to much higher nature with this. And this also gets you within pretty close reach of Foul Vapors. One of these Naiads with a Thistle Mace, for example, can really easily cast Foul Vapors, no problem. And that's really damaging to a lot of nations. This causes the whole battlefield to become poison. And again, you can even set traps with this. Get a Naiad with some stealth equipment or something. And then she could be like a Foul Vapors trapper. So when an army steps on top of you, she pops out with Foul Vapors and basically kills the whole army. So that's a pretty useful use of the Naiads. Your normal commanders can cast Foul Vapors. Not too difficult. It's not too difficult for them, but they do have to pump themselves up a little bit more to get to Nature 4. Now, a few other things. Once you break into Nature, you can start getting some more Nature summons to get more diversity. One of them is Ivy King, who's a pretty decent thug. He can summon the Ivy Men, which are also pretty decent Chaffee units. And again, this guy's pretty beefy as well as a thug. He's a Nature 3, which is also good for getting you higher in Nature. The Forest Troll Tribe is another option for getting into Nature, as well as Death and Glamour. This will open up a few other paths for you. This can possibly get you up to Death 2, which could pretty easily break you into some decent death magic. And again, this is really easy for example, a Naiad to cast. Naiad can get the Forest Troll Tribe without really much issue. Last one is Tree Lords. Tree Lords are not too useful. The main use of them is, again, if you need to do any kind of big nature spells. They do have 1 blood option. This one Tree Lord has blood magic, so that could be a way for you to break into blood. I mean, it's pretty late in the game. Enchantment 7 with 1 blood. You may just be better off using some of your scouts to scout around to blood hunt. But, you know, this is an option available for you that's really easy for you to get. Last one is Golems. In the late game, these open up as an option. Now, the problem is most of your mages don't have Earth and Astral together. Your explorers do have a chance for Earth or Astral, but never both at the same time. So this really depends on getting a god with both of these. I'd really recommend it. I think both Earth and Astral, higher Astral and some Earth, are really useful for you as Pelagia, so I would definitely consider that for a god. But this could be a good late game option to get these guys. These guys are amphibians as well, so they can fight on land and water. They're mindless, and they make really great, pretty cheap thugs as well. And since the late game, you're going to be pumping out tons and tons of gems, it's really going to be no problem to start mass producing these guys. Last one, let's talk about some endgame strategies. One endgame strategy is just doing a throne rush. Since you have not only recruitable Holy Threes in your Triton Kings, you also have really easy access to the Bishop Fish, which are a Holy 3 summon. Both these guys can make for great throne rushers as long as they accompany with a lot of units. So when you're pulling off a throne rush, the main thing is trying to hit as many leftover thrones as soon as possible, and having enough, enough siege strength to be able to break the fort, hopefully within one turn, so it's really difficult for anybody to respond. So there's a lot of ways to boost up siege strength. I mean, having a bigger army boosts siege strength, but the best ways are certain units. For example, Great Eagles is really easy for you to get. These have anything flying will have a lot of siege strength and be able to break sieges very easily. Cave Grubs are also pretty easy for you to get, and these guys, again, they have a siege bonus. This spell, Crumble, is pretty difficult for you to cast. I guess if you have a god that's Earth 5, or you can somehow pump your Earth level up a little bit, that would be very difficult, but it's maybe possible. I think you'd really have to rely on a god for it. But Crumble could be an option as well. Another option, again, if you can break into Earth a little bit more, Siege Golems. Now, these guys are not too expensive. They do come pretty late in the game, but these guys have a huge siege bonus of like 100. So a couple of these guys, like one or two of these guys, can easily pop forts like really, really quickly and deal with a lot of damage with that. So one of these guys per army can really make these forts fall apart quickly. Even just finding some wet ones or some pale ones as well. If you find a fort, if you find a province with pale ones available or wet ones, all of these guys have a small siege bonus. So you can recruit a bunch of these guys for your army to, again, give you a bit more siege strength. Another strategy that's kind of iconic for Pelagia is wish farming or pearl farming. In previous Dominions games, specifically Dominion 3, there was an item, the Clam of Pearls, which still exists, but the Clam Pearls used to give you a permanent Astral Pearl. So Pelagia could really easily make this item. They can make tons and tons of these Clam Pearls, and each Clam Pearl would make a Astral Pearl every single turn. So they could really ramp up the pearl farming really quickly, and it'd be totally broken. So in Dominions 3, that was such like a cheesy, broken strategy. It definitely got fixed after Dominions 3. By Dominions 4, they changed everything. So these gems were temporary. You get them only in a battle. You don't get them permanently. However, you can still do a kind of farming. It requires the spell Wish. So this is a very late game option. Another option is Arcane Nexus. I think both these are really good options for you to reach towards for the late game. Arcane Nexus gathers up a certain amount of all the gems used for every single spell by everybody in the game. It could be for magic, just casting spells, rituals, forging, empowerment, whatever. But it gets a portion of all those gems used and delivers them to you. So that's really useful as well. That could be a good option to boost up your gem income in the late game. It does require enchantment 9, but it's definitely a good goal for you. Wish is probably your main endgame goal. Wish is like, again, the iconic kind of Pelagia spell. It's 100 gems, alteration 9, and it takes a 9 path mage, 9 astral paths. So definitely you either have to boost one of your mages up a lot to be able to cast this, or take a god with this in mind. But the main reason this is useful for you is because a lot of your mages can turn water gems into astral pearls. So because of the pearl cultivation effect, they can turn an equal number of water gems into astral pearls. And since water gems are really, really easy to get, especially as an underwater nation, you're going to be swimming in water gems by the late game, especially if you can clear out the ocean without any competition. You're going to have tons and tons of them. You should also have a fairly decent core of pearl mages who can just be pumping out astral pearls every single turn until you have a huge number of them. And the main way you can use Wish for farming gems is using the spell Wish, which is 100 Astral Pearls, and wish for gems. Now this will give you 25 of each of the gems. That's about 200 gems in total. And including alchemy plus your pearl cultivation, plus just getting 25 astral pearls, that'll give you about a 25 pearl profit. So all of these gems, you can alchemize them into pearls. The water gems, you can use your pearl cultivation to turn them into pearls, and that'll give you about a 25 pearl profit. And just if you can continuously do that, have one mage continuously casting Wish for gems, you can actually get quite a lot of astral pearls over time, equivalent to like a pretty decent global spell. I can't think of any other global spells that would be equivalent to this number of pearls per turn. So that is really, really good. Now, what can you do with all these pearls? There's a lot of things you might want to do in the game. For example, you can cast some spells like Stellar Focus. This gives you even more pearls per turn, about 10 pearls per turn. Eyes of God lets you see the whole map and see all the information about the other nations. Astral Travel lets you, again, travel from one province to another, so it lets you take a big army and travel to another province. This can be really useful, for example, again, if you want to throne rush, you can just teleport a whole army onto the throne, pop it in one turn and take it, so that could be a good option as well. Some other things like Dispel, if you're playing online, other nations are going to be casting big global spells, so having tons and tons of pearls available basically means you can dispel whatever you want. Gateway is another similar spell to Astral Travel, except you need to teleport to a lab that you own. And of course, Wish itself could be an endgame strategy. Wish can do like so many different things. I don't even know what every single thing is you can wish for. You can wish for like almost every single unit in the game, including heroes, including like doom horrors and gods and all kinds of things. You can wish for gems, wish for money, wish for more magic power for your mage. You can wish to kill an enemy unit, kill an enemy god, kill anybody. You know, you can wish for Armageddon, and that'll kill like almost everybody on the map. So you can wish for so many different things. Wish for almost anything, even stupid things. So that could be a good endgame strategy for you as well, just spamming Wish. Now let's talk about a few final things before we go back to the game. First of all, let's look at some of the heroes. You only have one hero as Early Age Pelagia. That is Therodos Wondrous. He's pretty good. He has 3 air, 4 water, 3 astral, and 1 nature. The main thing is that he does come with 3 air, which is only 1 away from being able to build air boosters. The cheapest air booster requires air 4. So if you could somehow buff this guy up by 1, that can get you rolling with pumping out air boosters and things like that, which could be really useful for you. He does also have natively Astral 3, so that means it's really, really easy for him to get up to Astral 5 or 6 with just a few items. A Starshine Skullcap, a Coin of Meteoric Iron are both really easy to get, and that'll help you get up to Astral 5. A Wing of Wizardry or a Wing of Sorcery will help you get up to Astral 6, and that's kind of the limit for this guy. There are some other things you can get. Not really much else. I guess once you get later game, you can start wishing for example, blood slaves. You can empower someone in blood and maybe make a robe of the Magi that can get him up to 7. But once you get to 6, it's going to be really hard to start buffing this guy even higher than that. But still, you know, having a fairly decent Astral Mage, most of your Astral Mages are pretty low power. So this guy could be useful in that way. And again, just buffing him up in different ways as well. So is it worth taking luck scales just for this guy? I don't know, but I mean, he's definitely good. So it's worth considering if you do want to go luck as Pelagia. Now, last thing I'm going to talk about are some matchups. Now, normally I don't really talk about matchups in the game, but because you're an underwater nation, there's only like 5 underwater nations in Early Age. I think it's worth talking about the other underwater matchups, because definitely, unless you're alone in the water, you're going to be fighting one of these guys. So it's worth to know what you should do. First of all, let's talk about Early Age Relay. Now, what can you do against Early Age Relay? They're pretty tough. I think this is one of the harder matchups for you, in my opinion, I would say. Because they have pretty decent mages. Their mages are very strong astral mages. They're way stronger than yours. So they can easily magic duel you to death, or spam soul slay, or do big communions without really much trouble. They also have really high water magic. The Mine Lord, I think, has 4 water magic possible, which is equivalent to your Triton King. So they're pretty equivalent in terms of power underwater and ability to buff their elementals or all these things like that. The main weakness for them, it's also a strength for them. The fact that they have tons of slave troops means they don't pay much in upkeep, and they have a lot of mindless options who will never rout. But I think that's also a weakness for them. For one, a lot of these troops are pretty slow. Their fastest troops are also mindless. And if the mage is controlling them, because they're magic beings, if the mage is controlling them can be killed, then they will run away or dissipate. They won't be able to fight anymore. So a good thing you can do is, because your troops are so fast, you can make use of your really quick troops, like your, your coral guard or your cavalry, to flank the enemy and attack their mages directly. They don't really have that much support in the back line. A good relay player should keep some troops in the back line to defend. Maybe some non-mindless units that will stay there and fight. But again, because you have superior speed, it's possible for you to loop around and be able to attack them from behind. So that could be an option as well. Because they have a lot of magic units, you can also consider some anti-magic spells or magic resist, but that's less useful. I think just taking advantage of your speed is pretty good. Another thing is, because your Triton Kings can free spawn a lot of hippocampus, that can also counter a lot of the mass of troops that Relay tends to have, or even their free spawn. They sometimes will use their free spawn fighting other underwater nations. So since you have these free spawn who are also very, very good, you can take advantage of these to really spam them as well. And not to mention, you have a lot of good spells available for you. On the right here, you have, for example, if you want to do some thugging, I think Relay is not too bad when it comes to thugging. Mine Lords are really good thugs underwater. But your Triton Kings, I think, are just a little bit better. Same with some of your other mages. For example, you can use personal regeneration, and a lot of these earth spells you can use for buffs. Sorry, I put them as personal: Iron Skin, Temper Flesh, Iron Will. I forgot that the Triton King doesn't have earth magic, but you could use some of your mermages to buff the Triton Kings, point buff them, and get some other benefits for them as well. So that could help them be acting as thugs. And a few things are Bone Melter, again, something to target the enemy commanders. This can take them out. Foul Vapors as well. I don't think Relay has much resistance to Foul Vapors. I believe they don't really have much at all, so this should be able to take out a lot of their commanders without much poison resistance. And again, Orb Lightning will be able to take out a lot of their masses of chaffy troops, hopefully. Next matchup is Therodos. I think this one is not too bad for you. Now, Therodos is a mostly ghost nation, but because you have recruitable troops with magic weapons, that makes them a lot easier to deal with. The problem with Therodos' ghosts is they're all 0 protection. So if you can pop their ethereal, they're going to die really quickly. So because you have magic weapons, ethereal is like nothing, no problem for you. You're going to easily rip through them and tear them apart. And just mass up a lot of your pro guards, and you'll be able to rip through any kind of Therodos armies. Another thing is their attacks are also negated by magic resistance. So not only are your magic resist is already pretty good, so your magic resist is already pretty good for a lot of your troops. If you consider that when taking a bless, you can take a little bit of a higher magic resistance in your bless, and even use some spells, for example, like Spell Ward, to even improve your magic resistance even more. That'll make the Therodos troops incredibly ineffective against you, and give you, again, a huge bonus against them. Some other options, for example, you can use something to boost, again, magic resistance on some of your thugs. I think Therodos has a hard time dealing with thugs, so a unit like your Triton King, and maybe some point buffing for him to thug him, or some of his spells to boost up his magic resistance, will help him a lot, and be able to take out a lot of provinces from Therodos. Next one is Oceania. Now, Oceania is pretty difficult, I would say, for Pelagia to deal with. They have a lot of things similar to you. The main difference is that they don't have Astral, so I would really want to leverage the Astral magic against them. One thing you can consider is, while they can cast water elementals pretty easily, they can't do any real useful buffs for them. For example, Body Ethereal is super easy for you to cast, but they don't have access to it, and they don't really have any easy way to pop Ethereal. So if you could point buff your elementals with Body Ethereal, for example, that would make them really dangerous and be able to rip through a lot of the Oceanian armies. A few other options, again, just leveraging your Astral Magic against them, Soul Slay, Mind Burn, and Slave Mind. These are all ways you can get a little bit of an advantage, and they don't really have an easy way to respond to this. Lastly is Atlantis. This is another one of the nations that I think is quite difficult for you. One useful thing is foul vapors. A lot of the Atlantean troops don't really have an easy way to deal with poison, and they don't have any nature magic, so they can't cast any poison resist either. So foul vapors is really deadly for Atlantis. So if you can buff yourself up and start casting foul vapors, that's going to be incredibly powerful for you and be able to wipe out huge Atlantean armies. Another thing is your troops are, again, really fast, so you can outmaneuver a lot of the Atlantean troops. For example, here's a Warrior of the Deep and a Coral Guard. These are some of the fastest units that Atlantis has. I think the fastest unit they have in total is the Shambler of the Deep, which is combat speed 12. The Warrior of the Deep is a Sacred, combat speed 11. But you can see really, really slow. These guys, all the Atlantean troops are super slow. Meanwhile, your Trident Rider is combat speed 19, and your Pearl Guard, your Sacred, is combat speed 16. So all your troops are really fast, especially your Tritons are quite fast. So you can really use that to your advantage to outmaneuver any kind of Atlantean armies, and maybe, for example, attack the mages or whatever. Just go behind them and start tearing up their backline. So that's enough about the nation. Let's take a look at this test game I was playing. So not much else to really say. Expanding underwater was not too difficult. I think the bless I took was not that great. I would probably take a different bless. In the multiplayer game I'm playing with a different bless in this one. My bless was just an HP boost, as well as larger and berserker, but I think that was a mistake. Larger is just not good enough to be able to deal with fighting independence. It just doesn't really make the difference that much. I mostly conquered underwater using the cavalry. Let's take a look at one army. I used some of my sacreds as well as cavalry and just some chaffy militia troops, and that was pretty good for taking over the underwater. I didn't really have any much trouble with that. On land, here's a land force that I went with, and I went with a similar setup as I mentioned before. A lot of these chaffy turtle warriors, accompanied by some algae men and then some mages casting water elementals. Let's take a look at a battle I recently did, and we can see how that works. You can see I also had a bunch of net throws, but they pretty much all died, and the algae men really carried the day. The algae men are so good. So this is the setup. I think I probably should have put the net throwers to the side so they could just run through the side, throw some nets, and not get totally ripped apart. You can see they run in here and just die to the rock throws here. The algae men really carry the day. They're mindless, they won't run away, and they'll just hold there and hit all the enemies a bunch of times. The turtle warriors don't really do much, they just kind of run around and kind of do nothing. And again, the water elementals are there to help as well. So this is a pretty good setup for getting on land. I didn't have any trouble with this. This province was not too difficult, but again, it can be hard with only turtle warriors. I think you do need some supplement for them. So that was pretty good. I can also move into another province. I'm going to be moving over here, I think. And I'm going to try to make my way to the south, maybe over to this one, Strong Bay, and maybe build a fort there. I can also go north. I guess I could go here as well. I'd like to build a fort a little bit outside of my cap circle to take advantage of some of the resources around here. But I could also fort up this area too. Probably what I should do eventually is fort up my entire coastline and maybe find another area to invade as well. Not in the same area. Maybe have two kind of land kind of districts, I guess I could call it. Just so if someone invades me over here, I still have another option on the other side of the map or something like that. So that could be an option as well. I will try to take a few other land provinces here and there and just fort them up. Again, you shouldn't worry about pushing onto land too much as Pelagia. Just try to control the water if you can. Either take over the whole water if you're alone, or deal with any other underwater competitors as early as you can. And just try to get a few land provinces to get you a foothold, and just hold on to them as much as you can. Do whatever diplomacy you need to. Just try to not cause too much trouble underwater, and again, fort them up as heavily as possible so people are not tempted to come and bully you too much. But again, don't expand too much on land. If you expand a lot on land, people are going to get greedy and try to push you out. But if you just do a small little alcove on land, most people are not really going to bother with you too much. And you could take advantage of things like rivers. For example, if you can get a fort behind some rivers or mountains right on the coast, that again helps you defend a little bit better. It makes it harder for people to attack you. Now lastly, this is an online game I'm playing. There's about 9 other players in the game. Let's take a look at who's playing right now. Here's all the different players. Designated Shitting Street playing as Colassa. Deva Bowie playing as Calum, Dreamator playing as Zibalba, Heckham's Greatest playing as Helheim, Chud Saka Poba playing as Rus, Thursday playing as Niflheim, Disney's Wish, this is me, the one and only playing as Therodos, and Athamon playing as Relay. So I do have 2 other competitors underwater, Therodos and Relay, and I try to take a different bless to hopefully deal with that. I'll take a look at my bless here. My bless is a hard skin for a bit more natural protection. I took a magic resistance +2 and then a strength +1. So I don't know if that'll be enough to deal with these underwater troops. Again, I took the MR resist to deal with Therodos and any possible magic, maybe some astral magic against, any astral spells casted by Relay as well. And I believe Magic Resist will also help against the Mind Blasts. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure Magic Resist helps with resisting Mind Blast. So hopefully that'll make them a little bit more durable to the Relay Mind Blasters as well. And again, I'm going to try the strategies I just mentioned before, taking advantage of my magic weapons and my superior speed to hopefully deal with both of them. I'm really not going to be thinking about the land at all. This is a pretty big map underwater, so I'm going to be trying to fight underwater and hopefully take the water, then I can move on land later. I'm probably going to take some of these little islands around here. These will be my main options for getting onto land in a safe way. If I can take a couple of these little islands and defend them, that'll give me a lot of just land provinces, and then I don't really need to worry too much about anybody invading me, which is nice, because I don't really want to fight in the land nations. I want them to kind of deal with the things themselves. Oh, there's only one crossing right there. Okay, so there's a lot of little islands over here that are really easy for me to take and easy to defend as well. So I'm going to try to pick up a lot of these ones. Now, they won't be too useful for me because they're not really connected to much. But again, they'll be easy to defend. And the main point of having these land provinces is just to cast some spells rather than to push onto land. Pushing onto land is something I'm going to do in the late game, and it's going to be more reliant on summon units rather than anything I can recruit, because basically all my recruits are kind of crap. So let's get started. I took an Awake God. I took the Statue of Order, and with Astral 7 and Earth 7. The reason I did this is, for one, the Earth magic will give him a protection boost. Gives him protection +3, plus hard skin gives him a extra protection +5. So that gives him up to 33 protection in my Dominion. He's already quite strong. He's got 120 hit points, which is not bad. He's not as good as the Monolith, but I think he should be pretty good. And the main reason I took him is to both be as a defensive, defending god. If anyone attacks me, I can defend with them. But I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive. I'm going to be trying to get up to Thaumaturgy 4 and get Teleport. And once I can get Teleport, I can drop him on any other province I want and be able to just like mono drop them, basically. First of all, what I want to research is Conjuration. I want to get at least Algamen. So I wonder if I should go to Conjuration 3. I don't know if it's worth it to get the little elementals. Maybe. I definitely want to get Thaumaturgy 4 as soon as possible. So maybe something like this. Go up to Conjuration 3. Rush to Thaumaturgy 4. That'll put me within reach of Thaumaturgy 5 as well, which is Soul Slay, which will be really useful. And then I think I'm going to either go Evocation or Enchantment. Enchantment will get me access to Foul Vapors, Regeneration, things like that. That'll help me a lot for example, in Communions. Regeneration will help make my Turbocommunions a little bit easier to deal with. It'd also help if I want to do any thugging with the Triton Kings. Another thing I should think about is getting Construction. Construction 1, if I can get up to Construction 3, I'll be able to make the Shamblerskin armor, and that's very important for me as well. I think I will do that. I'll go up to Construction 3, and then I can start pushing into either Evocation for some more just power on land, or Enchantment. I think I will actually go Enchantment. That's a little bit more useful for me in terms of what's available here, so I'll probably go with that. Push up to Enchantment. I think it's Enchantment 6 for Foul Vapors, or Enchantment 7. Yeah, Enchantment 6 Foul Vapors. I could push up to here and maybe get a Naiad or whoever to cast this, so that could be pretty decent. So I think this is pretty good. Getting up to Conjuration 3 will give me a little bit more options for my troops. I'll be able to summon some simple elementals and things like that. I'm going to send out my scout. Now, I don't really give a shit about the land at the moment. I really want to scout the ocean and figure out where these other water nations are. If I can find them, I bet they're just on other sides of me. So if I can find them, I'm going to try to hopefully kill one of them very early, because If I can take out one of them, that'll make it a lot easier to deal with. And I think between the two of them, Relay is going to be the harder of the two. Now, Relay is a pretty weak nation because they are even harder. They have an even harder time getting on land than Pelagia does. If you saw my past video on Early Age Relay, you can see it's really, really hard for them to get on land. Really, really difficult. But in the water, they're actually not too bad. So I'm going to probably have the hardest time dealing with them. Therodos, I'm not too worried about because, again, I have the magic resist and magic weapons. That makes them a lot easier to deal with. So I'm not too bothered by them. And since they often go on land very easily, they may even not care about the water that much. They may be more focused on going on land. So I think if I can deal with Relay first, that'll be the main thing I'm going to be focusing on. I might even contact Therodos and try to make some kind of deal with him. If he can focus not too much on the water, focus more on land, I'll kind of leave him alone. And maybe I will focus on Relay, or we can both split Relay apart. But either way, let's recruit some units first. First thing I want to recruit is a bunch of these guys. Just get a couple of these guys. Now I can afford a few of them, not too many. And I have quite a bit of gold left. I think I'm going to get a pearlmage. That's pretty good. Anything else I can get? No, that's fine. Maybe I can get a couple other guys. Can I afford anyone else? Maybe one of these. Yeah, I don't know. Just get that. That's fine. So that'll be pretty good. This starting army is actually not too bad. I'm actually going to combine these guys. There's not really any reason to keep them apart. We'll put these guys in front. We'll set the riders to run around in the back, attack rearmost enemies. And then I'm also going to put some of my sacreds in this army as well. I'm going to make this guy into a prophet. And the number one thing is giving your prophet a funny name. So let's think of a funny name for this guy. We'll do Femboy Sora from Kingdom Hearts. He went back to Atlantis or whatever. Okay, there we go. So that's pretty good. Not much else to really do this turn. I'm just going to leave it like that. And I think I'll just end the turn. Is there anything I can recruit? So there's nothing underwater. That's too bad. I will try to prioritize picking up any of the underwater mercenaries if they appear. If I can get those, that'll give me a huge advantage underwater. And I only have 2 other competitors for them. So it should be a little bit easier to pick them up. But again, we'll see. Either way, I think I'm going to end the turn here. And I'm going to end the video here as well. And I'll see you guys again next time. So goodbye, guys.